so much for joining us today. My name is Vicki Townsend, and I'm the founder and president of Divorce Right. And we provide training for HR professionals and company supervisors. And we provide divorce coaching and case management, providing that extra guidance and direction that your divorcing employees so desperately need. Divorce is a huge disruptor, not only to the employee going through it, but to the company they work for. And our coaches here at Divorce Right have a unique 360-degree perspective on divorce. They have a deep understanding of the legal, financial, and emotional aspects of divorce, and they can handle even the highest conflict of cases with compassion and professionalism. Our coaches are trained to look at the entire picture, helping your employees to make good decisions based on their goals and their expectations. So, if you're an HR benefits manager or HR benefits provider or consultant, please reach out to us and see if adding our suite of solutions is a good fit for your business. And I want to talk, our conversation today is across on the other side of the world right now. We're going to be talking about prearranged marriages in the Southeast Asian cultures. We here in the United States have a lot of Indian and Chinese employees that come from a culture where prearranged marriage is a very big part of their lifestyle and their culture. So I want to introduce you to Dr. Chitrita. I apologize.
Suchitra.
Chitra, my apologies.
It's tricky. That's fine.
I had that down 5 minutes ago, but golly, she is a gynecologist based in Mumbai, India. Her own divorce after a 30-year marriage inspired her to become India's first certified conscious uncoupling coach. She supports women going through a divorce to find emotional freedom and their happiest ever after. As a matter of fact, you can find her on nearly every channel. So, I don't know why I'm having these. Suchitra,
That's right.
so please tell us where everybody can find you. Tell us about all of your social media channels and how women across the world can find you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Vicky. It's a real pleasure to be here as a guest on your podcast. I am available on Instagram at divorce.doctor. I am also available on Facebook as Suchitra D. That's my profile. I have a YouTube channel. So, again, if you type in Divorce Doctor 01, you'll be guided to it. But basically, if you find me on Instagram, you'll be able to get all the links in the bio.
Awesome. So
And
we
I'm
will
also,
put
of
that.
course, on LinkedIn, which is where I found you.
My goodness. I mean, 5 minutes ago I was saying your name, and now all of a sudden I'm all tongue-tied. So I apologize. But you know what? You and I have had conversations about the differences of what we experience here in the United States. We have a very high divorce rate here. Almost 50% of first marriages
Mhm.
end in divorce. And I know that's a lot different in India. Why don't you let's start with where is your divorce rate and why is it so different from what we do here in the United
Yeah.
States?
Yeah. So it's very interesting because the divorce rate in India that is documented, you will find statistics which say it is 1%.
Yeah.
And that's just so radically different from the one in the US. That I have actually had journalists, wanting to interview me saying, is it because of our Indian culture? And, why is it that, so many marriages continue compared to the Western influence, where, again, they quote the statistics of the US. And I actually asked them to turn the question on its head and ask, why is it that so many women who are in unhappy, abusive, or violent marriages are finding it difficult to leave? So I think that's really the question that needs to be asked. The other thing to understand about our culture, of course, it's a very deeply patriarchal culture. But there's also this, what shall I say, a lot of patriotic pride in believing that our culture is, so superior in all respects that every statistic is a reflection of that superiority.
Mm.
And as a result of which, in fact, a few months ago, one of the judges in the family court, in fact, said that love marriages are ending up in divorces more often than arranged marriages. Again, sort of trying to suggest that arranged marriages, which has been our culture, is actually leading to happy marriages. And where again, I had asked the journalist exactly as it flipped the question: why is it so difficult to leave an arranged marriage?
Mm.
So you're looking at the statistics from the wrong end, really, in trying to analyze it. So I think that really is a very, very radical difference. And I assure you that that 1% divorce rate has nothing to do with a superior culture. It has everything to do with how extremely difficult it is for a woman to leave a difficult and even an abusive or a violent marriage.
Tell me, why do you think that is? I think, although I know here in the United States, leaving a violent marriage is still very difficult for a lot of women, particularly because they feel isolated. A lot of
Mhm.
times they've been removed from the family by an abusive husband. And, but why do you think they end up staying when leaving can save their life? Suchitra, I think you are frozen. Are you there? Did I lose you? Well, it looks like we have lost Suchitra, so we are going to try and get her back, and we will be right back.
Ah,
There you are. There you are.
I didn't understand what happened. The connection dropped, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so. I think so. Well, we're coming from two different continents, right, on the other side of the world. So I appreciate you so much. So what we were talking about is, we know here in the United States, women can be challenged to leave a violent marriage. In some respects that's very similar. But in your culture, it's even more difficult. So can you go into that just a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think primarily, a lot of my work over the last 20, 25 years has been on women's health and women's rights issues. I've been doing a lot of work across the region where we do capacity building programs to understand gender power, patriarchy, and how that impacts women's autonomy and agency. And I think one of the things that has become very clear through all this work is that very often women are more afraid to leave because they worry that the violence might escalate and
Yes.
that they don't actually have enough support to keep them safe. And I found this to be quite true even with the clients I talk to. Some of them do say that their own parents are not very supportive of them leaving because it's seen as something which is an embarrassment to the family or brings shame to the family. And very often, the earlier generation, so their mothers themselves, they have experienced violence. And they're like, you know what, you just have to accept it and get on with it, kind of thing. So I think that makes it even more difficult, not knowing that you don't have support from someone, because by the time the situation escalates to an extent where you even start thinking that you want to leave, there may be one or two children that are there. Very often, the woman might have left her job after the second child, so as to be the primary parent. And in all those situations, she then kind of finds herself trapped. Financially, she doesn't have the security. She doesn't have the emotional support or moral support of her parents or the people who one would expect. So she really doesn't see how leaving is going to make things better
Right.
when now she's going to be a single parent with far less or no money looking after the children, with this ex actually still capable of hurting her or harming her if things really escalate.
Why do you think, and maybe is it changing, that violence against women in that culture is more accepted? And I'll if I can explain, we have a divorce coach here with us here at Divorce Right. She came from your culture. She was physically abused in India before they left to come here to the United States. Her mother knew about it. She came here to the United States and she called her mother from the emergency room with a broken arm, a broken clavicle, and a broken orbital bone. And she said she was going to divorce her husband. And her mother's answer was, if you do that, if you divorce your husband, I'll drink acid. And so she stayed for another 4 years. And she stayed because of the pressure of thinking what she was going to do to her mother and to the family name and to, shaming the family.
Yeah.
But why is it that their physical health is less important, do you think?
So I think it's not just the physical health, I'm really sorry to hear about what you just shared about your divorce coach. Unfortunately, it's not a rare story. I
Mhm.
have heard it myself, very often. And as we say, in a patriarchal environment where it is actually the men who have all the power, women actually end up being the agents of the patriarchy. So they gain their power and their validation really from their relationships with the men. So you'll very often find it's the mothers and the mothers-in-law who are the gatekeepers, in a sense. And this whole idea that the family's honor and shame in some way rests only with the woman is again a very age-old story, of controlling women's sexuality, of controlling women's mobility, and it is, I think, still part of that social conditioning that we are pressurized by, and this kind of emotional blackmail is very, very common at all levels. It'll be like, we want you to become a doctor. Oh, if you decide not to become a doctor, your mother will stop eating.
Right.
There's this whole sort of cultural, I think, normalization of this kind of toxic behavior towards one's children.
Is it changing?
I think it's changing. It's definitely changing. Not fast enough for someone like me, but
But
it is
you're
changing.
you're such a you're such a great voice over there and taking care of yourself physically and emotionally as priority here, so I honor the work that you're doing with trying to change that
Yeah,
there.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. But I think it was difficult for me also. I could have left much earlier than I actually did. But there's always something or the other which we tend to prioritize over our own health.
Mhm.
Because I think we've been conditioned from childhood. In fact, when I first started learning for myself this kind of work, which I'm now offering to others, I was so astonished to learn that, oh my God, I could have boundaries. I can say no. And I
Right.
don't have to self-abandon at every given opportunity, including volunteering to self-abandon whenever the slightest opportunity showed itself. Whoever it was for, whether it's for parents, whether it's for the sake of the marriage, the household, the in-laws, the children. There's constantly this innate urge to self-abandon, and I think that is something which has got normalized for centuries, and it is so deeply ingrained in us that it's going to take time to emerge from it. But
Mhm.
I think the change is happening. It's happening slowly. In fact, since the pandemic, the divorce rates have doubled in the major cities in India.
Really?
Yes, I think people did have a wake up call that, life is fragile and this is it, this is your one chance. So those who can and those who are empowered enough are choosing to step out of marriages. In fact, a city like Bangalore, which you may be familiar with because of, Infosys and all the big software companies there, they had to set up new family courts. I think they've set up about four new family courts because the case load was too much for the existing ones to handle. So I think change is happening. Again, I'm not saying it's necessarily going to be very easy for women to step out because the label of divorcee, the way single men, other men then treat you as a single woman, there is a lot of pressure, there's a lot of shame, blame, guilt. So there is a huge component of emotional burdens that women carry even when they step out. So they may, remove themselves from an unhappy, toxic, physically violent maybe environment, but they end up in a society which isn't really supportive of
It's
the
shunning
choices they
them.
have made.
Right.
In a
It's
way, it's an
shunning them.
ostracizing of a kind. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
They're shunned but for leaving the very violent situation
Yeah,
that saves their life, but yet they're outcasts because they've gone against the culture.
yeah, yeah.
So I'm thinking about here in the United States because I know that I work with hospitals where we have a great number of Indian doctors.
Hmm.
We have software companies where there's a great number of software engineers
Yeah.
that are in the Southeast Asian culture. And I was actually very surprised to learn that Chinese also do have arranged marriages, prearranged marriages. I was very surprised by that. Is there some sort of statistic that I don't know if you're familiar enough with the Chinese culture in prearranged marriages, but I was very surprised to learn that they do it too.
Yeah. No, I don't have the statistics, but I'm not surprised because culturally we do have many similarities, being among the oldest civilizations. As I said, the way patriarchy is set up, once you have private possession, everything depends on your heir. And the only way to know that the child is yours is to control women's mobility and sexuality. Because
Mm,
in the olden days, let's say, 1,000 years ago, there was no other way to be sure that this was your child, and you
hmm.
didn't want to leave your whatever private property is to anybody else's child, in that sense. So I think that gradually grew from a system of protecting to a system of control, and then eventually almost like an imprisonment of women within that. So essentially it's like, as the kind of controls that you have don't always have to be physical controls.
Yeah.
So even if the woman is free to go in and out, she will still be under surveillance by everyone. Everyone will know that, why is she going there? Was she supposed to go to the market? How come she came back after 2 hours? So there's always this kind of, so community can be supportive, but community can also play a role in that kind of surveillance and that kind of control. So I think the arranged marriages were a way also to ensure, because marriages a long time ago weren't really about love and romance the way we position them nowadays. They
Right.
were about property, they were about political alliances, they were about what made sense for you in terms of. So in India, for example, you marry, the arranged marriages are arranged within your religion, within your caste, within your subcaste. So a whole lot of other criteria come into play besides the two individuals who are getting married. And there's very little in ways of trying to understand red flags or to do a negotiation which is beyond this kind of a logistical negotiation. Do you tick the right boxes in terms of all these criteria? But I think things are changing. Another thing that I think that kind of cripples us a little bit in this aspect is that prenup agreements are not considered legally valid.
Really?
Yes, because again, the cultural idea being that marriage is this sacred bond, and actually, it's supposed to be for 7 lifetimes. So I think that's something which hopefully, things will change in the future. But I didn't know it until I was going through my own divorce, and of course, I did a whole lot of research and read every single document that I could, and I was quite shocked to realize that this didn't exist. Not that I knew about it when I got married 30 years ago, but even now I'm surprised that this is not something that people can take care of before they enter into a marriage.
That's so interesting. So ultimately, for me, what I'm feeling, because I'm feeling a lot of anxiety around this conversation, because we here in the United States as women are going through a lot where we've made a lot of advancements in reproductive freedoms and things of that nature that are now changing to, you know, back the way they were
Yeah.
before. So I'm hearing a lot of things that is in your culture that I think you guys are starting to feel like you guys want to fight for it as well, and fight for
Absolutely.
that freedom, fight for not to be property, right? It seems pretty simple, right? But it took, here in the United States, women died, to get the right to vote. And so we have to think about some of the things that, how we can support our employees here that come
Yeah.
from that culture. So are there some things that so if you can speak to a typical American employer that is not understanding the culture, are there some things that you can kind of shine a light on so that an employer can give them the support and help that they need from their cultural perspective? How can we support them a little better?
I'm not sure I have all the answers, but I could probably reflect on some of the things you've asked. I think it's very important to recognize that women who were born and brought up or raised in India and who have moved to the US after being married have many, I think, centuries of cultural conditioning.
Mhm.
So their first reaction to something like this will be denial. So it will take a lot of support to create a safe space where they can actually come out and say in so many words that yes, I am experiencing violence or I am experiencing trauma. Because I have heard of people in the US who've been divorced, but they come back to India for festivals together, pretending to be a couple, so
Mm.
that the families back home here in India
Don't
don't ever know
don't
about it.
know. Yeah.
you know so it's such a big deal to really save face in that sense. So the idea of the extended family is almost like really the old time village. It's like everybody's business is everybody's business. And as I said, it's changing a little with nuclear families, urban settings. I think the newer generation, those who are right now in their 30s and 40s, are moving away from it. But again, uh, urban areas, women who have an opportunity to study and work outside, I don't think it's changing so much for the vast majority. But it is time for it to change. So those who come to the US, I think, are already the educated, people who have ambitions, who have aspirations. So they may be seeing this also as something which will put an end to their aspirations to, live abroad and have the kind of other freedoms that they have access to, which they wouldn't back home. So there may be many, many reasons why they are reluctant to come up and say, and why they may not be actually articulating the real reason or the
Mm.
real situation, because they don't feel safe enough. So I think having somebody who can assure them that safety, and I think also, little being non-judgmental about their cultural, I would say, in a way, imperatives or cultural obligations to some extent.
Mm.
Because just because you're getting a divorce doesn't mean you can throw off the yoke of, your entire lifetime of conditioning, or what you believe is the way you ought to be, because you are also battling with yourself inside at the same time.
Yeah.
So, I think that's really important. So, to be very sensitive to that, create a safe space, be non judgmental, and I think allow them time um, to emerge from it on their own. Because so many times the mindset shift doesn't happen just because theoretically you know what is right. Otherwise people wouldn't smoke anymore, right? Because every cigarette packet, just looking at it, you would be like, oh, okay, that's what's going to happen. Sorry, I'm not going to smoke anymore. So I think changing habits, changing behavior, it's a process.
So being here in the United States, is there anything that you want to tell anyone from your culture living here, something that you wish that you had known about the divorce process, about how you feel now, something that you wish that they knew or understood? Maybe they don't even understand it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So I think for me, when I was going through the process, I wasn't really sure what lay beyond that. And working with a coach, working with a mentor really, really helped me unlock a lot of things and, move step by step. So my key messages would be: take it one day at a time. It's a journey. It's not a sprint. You can't just one day you're married and next day you're divorced. It's not that easy. You need to untangle yourself from that, because unfortunately there's something called a trauma bonding. So even if you've been abused, you sometimes may still miss that person and then hate yourself for missing that person. So there's a whole lot of unraveling and repacking that you need to do for yourself. But what I want to really say is, divorce is a solution, divorce is not the problem.
Mhm.
And it's just a chapter. You've got the whole book of your life still to write. So I think, to me, the most important reaffirmation was that you have this one lifetime. You are here to gather a whole set of human experiences. Marriage is just one of the milestones. If it doesn't work out, leave it with as much dignity and what shall I say, kindness to yourself as possible. I'm not saying necessarily you have to immediately be kind to the other person, although the conscious uncoupling process eventually does take you through those stages. But be kind to yourself, be compassionate to yourself. You are worthy of having a happy, safe, and peaceful life, and you should do whatever you can to get yourself that. Which is why one of the things I do in the program, the step, we call it happily even after.
Mhm.
Because in the traditional fairy tale, you have the prince and the princess get married and they live happily ever after. But there
Right.
is a happily even after a divorce, even after a breakup, even after a separation. Because essentially, what happens is, you may have loved that person and made some commitments and made some promises, but you also had some hopes and dreams from that relationship, from the future. A divorce is really a death of all that. So we don't actually allow ourselves to grieve and mourn a divorce the way we do when a loved one dies,
Right.
but that relationship meant something to you. So allowing ourselves to grieve that, I think, is a very, very cathartic and very important process, because unless you cleared away all that baggage from the past, it's very difficult to, literally start looking in a different direction and move forward. And moving forward is the most amazing thing. If you had asked me 4 5 years ago whether this is where I would be, there is no way. Like, I would have told you, there is no way that I was going to be in this position. But my life has dramatically changed. I mean, in some ways I feel my divorce has become like my superpower. I have discovered
Agreed.
so much about myself.
And what I love that you've done, and we call that here in the United States making lemonade out of lemons, right? That's what I've
Right.
done with my divorce. And that's what you're doing with yours. And yours is more deeply entrenched in culture and history and belief systems, even though a lot of ours here are as well. But you are a trailblazer, my friend, and you are standing up for women. And so, what I want to know as we bring this down, if I'm working with a company here in the United States and they have an Indian cultural marriage, prearranged marriage, would you be able to assist them at culturally speaking to support them? Because you speak to them like I cannot, right?
Absolutely.
And so
Yeah.
what I want to do is whenever we have a situation like this, and like I say, for our STEM companies, those, science, technology, engineering, and math-based companies, there are prearranged marriages. Interestingly enough, I'm working with a police department, and there is an Indian prearranged
Mm,
marriage that we're working on there. I would
yeah.
love to know that you are there, even for those of us in the United States, to help them through the mental process of getting through something that is culturally very challenging to get out of. So
Absolutely. I mean, I would be more than happy to support, because I think this is really my mission and my calling.
I agree.
And especially, as you said, the women in STEM or in medicine, or, in these high intensity jobs, I know how hard we have to work and how much we have to sacrifice to reach there. So I would definitely want to support them not being held back as a result of this emotional baggage or a toxic relationship, which they need to really free themselves from, and move forward, because there is so much joy and liberation beyond that. But not everyone can take that step on their own. I know I needed a mentor and a coach, so I am
Yeah.
very excited to be able to step into that role for someone else, and be a part of their journey. And I definitely, like,
Would
100%.
would
Thank
love
you.
that. So everybody that's out there, if you're listening to this and you find yourself in a situation where you have someone in your company with a prearranged marriage and needs to get out, please reach out to us. We want to connect you with Dr. Suchitra so that that person can get through this with some dignity and integrity, and giving them the best opportunity to have the best life like she does. So thank you so much for being with us. I'm so sorry about the technical difficulties. We are gonna chop this up and get rid of some of the bad stuff that happened. So we'll put it back out there. But thank you so much for joining us today. So appreciated this topic, something that we here in the United States don't understand very much of, but we're starting to learn, and I'm starting to learn, and I find this topic so fascinating. So thank you so much from the other side of the world. Thank you so much for joining us today. And we'll be back
Thank
next
you.
week with another topic on how you can support your divorcing employees as they go through one of the most life-changing and life-altering crises of their lives. So we'll see you next week. Suchitra, thank you so much for joining us, and bye-bye for now.